There comes a moment on the inner path when you begin to notice how much of your life has been spent explaining, justifying, correcting, defending your intentions, defending your choices, defending your past, defending your worth. And if you are honest with yourself, you may realize that this habit has been so deeply woven into your identity that you no longer question it, you simply react. Someone doubts you, and your chest tightens. Someone misunderstands you, and your mind races. Someone judges you, and suddenly you feel compelled to prove something not to them, but to the invisible jury you have been carrying inside your own consciousness. And yet, the soul has never asked you to defend yourself. The soul does not argue. The soul does not explain. The soul simply is. To stop defending yourself is not an act of weakness. It is one of the most powerful spiritual decisions you can make. Because the need to defend always arises from the same illusion. The belief that who you are can be diminished by someone else's perception. The ego lives inside that illusion. It survives by comparison, by approval, by validation. It believes that worth must be negotiated, earned, protected, or explained. The soul knows something very different. The soul knows that worth is intrinsic, not conditional. It is not given, and it cannot be taken away. When you stop defending yourself, you are not giving up your power. You are reclaiming it from a world that never had the authority to define you in the first place. Think about how often arguments arise, not because truth is at stake, but because identity feels threatened. Someone challenges your view, and suddenly it feels like they are challenging you. Someone disagrees with your choice, and it feels like an attack on your intelligence, your morality, your value. But the awakened mind begins to see that disagreement is not danger. Judgment is not a verdict. Misunderstanding is not a condemnation. These are merely experiences passing through awareness. When you no longer fuse your sense of self with opinions, roles, or outcomes, you become free to observe without reacting, to listen without collapsing, to remain centered even when the world is noisy. There is a quiet dignity that emerges when you stop defending yourself. It is not arrogance. It is not indifference. It is an inner steadiness that says, I do not need to convince you of who I am because I am no longer trying to convince myself. That steadiness is the signature of higher consciousness. It comes from knowing that your essence was complete before anyone formed an opinion about you, and it will remain complete long after those opinions have dissolved into silence. When you no longer argue with reality, reality begins to cooperate with you in ways that feel almost miraculous. The universe does not respond to explanations, it responds to alignment. You can spend your life defending your actions, or you can spend it embodying your truth. One is exhausting, the other is effortless. When you live from alignment, your presence speaks louder than any justification ever could. You do not need to announce who you are. You demonstrate it through the energy you carry, the compassion you extend, the peace you refuse to surrender. This is why the wisest people often say the least. They have learned that silence, when it comes from awareness, is not emptiness, it is authority. Defensiveness is rooted in fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being rejected, fear of being unseen or unworthy. But fear dissolves in the presence of awareness. The moment you notice yourself preparing to defend, pause, breathe. Ask yourself gently, what am I afraid will happen if I don't? You may discover that what you are protecting is not your truth, but an image, not your soul, but a story. And stories, no matter how convincing, are not who you are. They are costumes consciousness wears for a while, then sets aside. To stop defending yourself is to trust that life is intelligent. It is to trust that you do not need to control how you are perceived in order to fulfill your purpose. The river does not defend its direction, it flows. The sun does not defend its brightness, it shines. The tree does not defend its growth, it grows. And you were not designed to spend your life explaining your existence. You were designed to express it. When you align with that truth, you move out of resistance and into grace. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak from clarity, not compulsion. It means your words arise from intention, not insecurity. There is a vast difference between responding and reacting. Reaction is automatic, ego-driven, and fueled by the need to protect an identity. Response is conscious, spacious, and guided by awareness. When you stop defending yourself, you gain access to that space. You begin to choose peace over proving, understanding over winning, presence over performance. Notice how often the ego wants the last word. It believes that closure comes from being right, but the soul knows that closure comes from letting go. There are no justified resentments in higher consciousness, because resentment requires a story of injury, and higher consciousness sees only lessons, growth, and unfolding intelligence. When you release the need to defend, you also release the need to blame. And in that release, forgiveness becomes natural, not as a moral obligation, but as a logical consequence of understanding that nothing real has ever been threatened. The practice of not defending yourself is a form of meditation in daily life. Each interaction becomes an invitation to remain present. Each criticism becomes an opportunity to observe without attaching. Each misunderstanding becomes a reminder that your worth does not fluctuate with circumstances. This is how inner freedom is cultivated, not in isolation, but in relationship. Not by avoiding the world, but by meeting it without armor. There is a profound relief that comes when you realize you no longer have to manage your image. You no longer have to curate how you are seen. You no longer have to correct every misconception. The mind relaxes. The body softens. Energy that was once spent on self-protection becomes available for creativity, love, service, and joy. This is not a small shift. It is a radical reorientation of consciousness from self-consciousness to soul consciousness. When you live this way, something extraordinary happens. People may still judge you, but their judgments no longer hook you. They may still misunderstand you, but their misunderstandings no longer define you. And paradoxically, the less you defend yourself, the more trustworthy you appear. The less you explain, the more grounded you feel. The less you argue, the more powerful your presence becomes. This is because power does not come from persuasion. It comes from coherence, from living in harmony with who you truly are. The higher state of consciousness you step into when you stop defending yourself is not aloof or detached. It is deeply compassionate. You begin to see that others defend themselves for the same reason you once did: fear, conditioning, pain, confusion. And instead of meeting defensiveness with defensiveness, you meet it with understanding. You no longer need to win because you are no longer playing the game of validation. You are playing the game of awakening. Remember this: you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be aligned with truth. You are not here to convince the world of your value. You are here to remember it. And when you remember, you naturally radiate a quiet confidence that does not need applause. You trust the universe not because everything goes your way, but because you know that whatever comes your way cannot diminish what you are. So the next time you feel the urge to defend yourself, see it as a gentle signal, not a command, but a reminder to return to awareness, a reminder to breathe, a reminder to choose presence over performance. Let the moment pass without resistance. Let the silence speak. Let your life, not your explanations, be the evidence of who you are. This is the freedom Wayne Dyer spoke of, the freedom that comes when you stop asking the world for permission to be yourself. When you stop defending, you stop fighting shadows. You step into alignment with a higher intelligence that has always been guiding you. And in that alignment, you discover a truth so simple and so profound that it requires no defense at all. You are already enough. You have always been enough. And nothing outside of you has ever held the authority to say otherwise. And as you remain in this space of non-defense, something subtle yet extraordinary begins to occur within you. You start to feel the difference between reacting from memory and responding from presence. Memory is heavy. It carries the weight of every past wound, every conditioned belief about how you should be seen, every learned reflex that once promised safety but now only tightens the knot inside your chest. Presence, on the other hand, is light. It has no history to protect and no future to secure. It simply allows life to move through you without obstruction. In this allowing, you discover that peace is not something you create, it is something you stop interfering with. The mind may protest at first. It may whisper that silence is surrender, that not explaining is agreement, that not correcting is failure. But these whispers are echoes of an old training, a world that taught you to equate worth with noise and strength with resistance. The deeper intelligence within you knows otherwise. It knows that true strength is spacious, not rigid. It knows that confidence does not announce itself, it radiates. When you no longer rush to clarify, justify, or persuade, you give yourself the gift of inner stillness. And from that stillness, clarity emerges on its own, unforced and precise. In this state, you begin to recognize how often defending yourself has been a way of defending the past. Old decisions, old identities, old versions of yourself that were necessary at the time but no longer reflect who you are becoming. When you stop defending, you allow yourself to evolve without apology. You stop dragging yesterday into today. You let each moment stand on its own, fresh and unburdened. This is living in the now, not as a concept, but as a felt experience where the heart is no longer braced for impact. There is also a deep humility that unfolds here, a humility that is not self-diminishing but self-liberating. You realize that you do not need to be right to be whole. You do not need to be admired to be at peace. You do not need to be agreed with to be aligned. Humility, in its highest form, is the willingness to let life be larger than your personal narrative. It is the quiet acceptance that every person you encounter is seeing the world through a lens shaped by their own history, fears, and hopes, and that none of those lenses have the power to alter your essence. As this understanding deepens, forgiveness ceases to be an effort and becomes a natural movement of consciousness. You forgive not because others deserve it, but because you no longer wish to carry what does not belong to you. You see that holding on to the need to defend keeps you tethered to the very energies you long to be free from. Releasing that need is an act of self-respect. It is saying gently and firmly, I choose peace over proving. And in that choice, the body relaxes, the breath deepens, and the nervous system finally receives the message that it is safe to rest. From here, life begins to meet you differently. Conversations soften, conflicts lose their charge. Even when disagreement arises, it no longer feels personal. It feels informational. You listen more deeply because you are no longer listening for threats. You speak more clearly because your words are no longer filtered through fear. And when silence comes, it feels rich rather than awkward, full rather than empty. Silence becomes a companion, a reminder that truth does not require volume. You may notice that the universe mirrors this inner shift in unexpected ways. Opportunities appear without struggle. Support arrives without solicitation. Guidance becomes more intuitive, less analytical. This is not coincidence, it is resonance. When you stop broadcasting defensiveness, you stop attracting situations that require it. You begin to live in harmony with a higher order one that does not test you through opposition, but teaches you through alignment. At this level of awareness, you understand that your life is not a courtroom where you must continually present evidence of your goodness, intelligence, or worth. It is a classroom, a sanctuary, a field of experience designed to awaken you to who you are beyond roles and labels. And the lesson is always the same, though it arrives in countless forms. Nothing real needs to be defended. Truth stands on its own. Love explains itself. Being requires no justification. So you walk forward now with a lighter step, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You trust the intelligence that breathes you, guides you, and unfolds your path with quiet precision. You let go of the impulse to manage how you are received, and in doing so, you finally receive yourself. This is the higher state of consciousness you step into, not elevated above others, but rooted more deeply in what is timeless, compassionate, and free. And in this freedom, you discover the simplest, most transformative realization of all. When you no longer defend yourself, you are no longer at war with life. You are in dialogue with it. You listen, you respond, you grow. You live not as an argument to be proven, but as a presence to be felt. And that presence, calm, awake, and quietly powerful, becomes your greatest contribution to the world. And as this presence stabilizes within you, you begin to sense a deeper reorientation taking place. Not dramatic, not announced, but unmistakable. It is as though the center of gravity within your being has shifted from the outer world to the inner landscape, where once you scanned faces for approval, tones for validation, outcomes for reassurance, you now rest in a quieter knowing. You are no longer negotiating your existence moment by moment. You are inhabiting it. This is the subtle liberation that comes when identity loosens its grip and awareness takes the lead. You may notice how time itself feels different here. Urgency fades. The need to rush toward resolution dissolves. When you stop defending yourself, you step out of the illusion that something essential is always at risk. You begin to understand that life is not an exam you can fail, nor a performance you must perfect. It is a process of remembering again and again that you are participating in something far more intelligent than the thinking mind. This remembrance softens the edges of experience. Even uncertainty becomes less threatening when you trust that you are held by a larger order. In this space, you also start to recognize how much energy has been reclaimed. Energy that was once bound up in rehearsing conversations, anticipating criticism, replaying misunderstandings. That energy returns to you now as vitality, creativity, and quiet joy. You feel more available not just to others, but to yourself. You listen inwardly with the same compassion you once reserved for defending outwardly. And in that listening, you hear guidance that does not shout, does not argue, does not insist, it simply invites. The ego may still appear from time to time, as it always does. Old reflexes may surface, the impulse to explain may rise, but now there is space around it. You do not shame it or suppress it. You observe it with kindness, understanding that it once served a purpose, and because you no longer identify with it, it loses its authority. Awareness watches. Choice returns. This is not perfection. This is mastery, gentle, patient, and profoundly human. As you continue living from this place, relationships transform, some deepen, some dissolve, some rearrange themselves in ways that feel both surprising and inevitable. You no longer cling to being understood. You value resonance over agreement. You discover that true connection does not come from convincing another of your truth, but from meeting them as they are, without armor, without agenda. And when connection is not possible, you release it without bitterness, trusting that alignment is always kinder than attachment. There is also a growing intimacy with life itself. Ordinary moments become luminous. A breath, a pause, a simple exchange carries a quiet richness that once went unnoticed. This is because you are no longer split, part of you present, part of you defending. You are whole in the moment. And wholeness has a way of revealing beauty where the fragmented mind once saw only problems to solve. Gradually, you realize that the practice of not defending yourself has become a way of being. It is no longer something you remember to do. It is something you naturally embody. You move through the world with an ease that does not depend on circumstances. Challenges still arise, but they do not destabilize you. Praise may come, but it does not inflate you. Criticism may appear, but it does not define you. You remain centered, not because you are unaffected, but because you are anchored in something deeper than reaction. And from this anchoring, trust blossoms not blind optimism, but a steady confidence in the unfolding intelligence of life. You trust that what needs to be said will be said. What needs to be clarified will clarify itself. What needs to fall away will do so without force. You trust that your path does not require constant defense because it is guided by a wisdom that does not make mistakes, even when it uses experiences you once labeled as wrong. So you continue gently and deliberately, choosing awareness over argument, presence over protection, truth over tension. You let your life speak in the language of alignment. And as you do, you discover that the quiet confidence you now carry is not something you created, it is something you allowed. It was always there, waiting beneath the noise, waiting for you to stop defending, stop proving, stop bracing, and simply be. And with this balance restored, you begin to sense that life is no longer pushing against you, nor are you pushing against it. There is a rhythm now, subtle, intelligent, trustworthy. You move with it rather than against it. Decisions arise with less struggle. You no longer need to force certainty before taking a step, because you have learned that clarity often follows movement, not the other way around. When you are not defending yourself, you are not frozen in self-doubt. You are responsive, fluid, alive. There is a new relationship with uncertainty that develops here. What once felt like danger now feels like openness. You understand that uncertainty is not the absence of guidance, but the presence of possibility. The mind prefers fixed answers because it seeks control, but the soul thrives in openness because it trusts direction. When you stop defending, you stop clinging to rigid positions. You allow yourself to be taught by experience rather than threatened by it. Life becomes a dialogue instead of a debate. This balance also reveals itself in how you relate to success and failure. Neither one defines you anymore. Achievement no longer inflates your sense of self, and setbacks no longer diminish it. You see both as movements within a larger unfolding waves on the surface of something much deeper and more stable. This stability does not come from certainty about outcomes. It comes from certainty about being. You know who you are beyond roles, beyond results, beyond recognition, and that knowing cannot be shaken. As this understanding matures, compassion expands naturally. You see how many people are still exhausting themselves, trying to be seen, trying to be right, trying to be safe through defense. You recognize the tension in their words, the urgency in their reactions, the fear beneath their arguments, and instead of meeting that fear with resistance, you meet it with presence. You listen without needing to fix. You speak without needing to dominate. Sometimes you say nothing at all, allowing your calm to do the work that words cannot. There is a quiet courage required to live this way. It takes courage to remain open in a world that rewards defensiveness. It takes courage to be still when others are reactive, to be grounded when others are restless, to be silent when others demand explanation. But this courage is not effortful. It does not come from willpower. It comes from alignment, from standing in a truth that does not need reinforcement. Once you taste this kind of courage, you recognize it as strength without aggression, confidence without comparison. Gradually, the need to manage how you are perceived fades into the background of your awareness. You are no longer preoccupied with the story others are telling about you. You are engaged with the life you are actually living. Attention returns to the present moment, where power has always resided. You realize that defending yourself was never about protection, it was about distraction. And now that the distraction has fallen away, what remains is a direct, intimate connection with life itself. This is where balance reveals its deeper meaning. Not neutrality, not detachment, but integration. Mind and heart working together, action informed by awareness, stillness alive with movement. You do not retreat from the world, nor do you lose yourself in it. You participate fully without losing your center. You care deeply without clinging. You engage honestly without armoring. This is the equilibrium of awakened living. And in this equilibrium, something settles permanently within you. A quiet trust. Not that everything will go as planned, but that whatever unfolds will contribute to your awakening. You trust that you do not need to defend your path because it is uniquely yours. You trust that life knows what it is doing, even when the mind does not. You trust yourself, not the constructed self that seeks approval, but the deeper self that observes, learns, and grows through every experience. So you continue forward, not striving, not proving, not resisting. You move with a steady openness, allowing life to reveal itself step by step. You are no longer defined by reaction, nor driven by fear. You are guided by awareness, grounded in being, and balanced between heaven and earth, fully human, deeply conscious, and quietly free. And now, as this understanding settles into the deepest chambers of your being, you may notice a stillness that feels unfamiliar yet profoundly intimate. It is the stillness that comes when nothing inside you is arguing with the moment. You are not rehearsing explanations. You are not anticipating defense. You are not bracing for impact. You are simply here. And in this here-ness, you realize that peace was never something missing from your life. It was something waiting for you to stop interrupting it. You begin to sense that life has always been inviting you into this simplicity. Not a simplicity of circumstances, but a simplicity of relationship with yourself. When you no longer stand guard over an identity, you discover that awareness itself is enough. It holds joy without grasping, sorrow without drowning, love without fear. You no longer need to armor your heart, because you are no longer mistaking vulnerability for danger. Openness becomes natural when you trust the intelligence that lives beneath every breath. There is a gentleness now in how you move through the world. You listen with your whole being. You speak with care, not calculation. You allow others their opinions without absorbing them as truth. You have learned that you do not need to resist what is false when you are anchored in what is real. Truth does not compete. It does not shout. It does not defend itself. It simply remains steady, luminous, undeniable. And in this remaining, you touch something timeless within yourself, a presence that existed before you learned to explain yourself, before you learned to perform, before you learned to protect. This presence has watched every chapter of your life unfold with infinite patience. It has never doubted your worth. It has never questioned your belonging. It has always known that you were enough, not because of what you do, but because of what you are. From this place, gratitude arises effortlessly. Not gratitude for perfection, but gratitude for participation, for being alive in a universe that is constantly offering you opportunities to remember who you are. Even the moments that once felt adversarial now reveal their hidden gift. They taught you the cost of self-defense and the freedom of self-trust. They guided you gently and persistently back to yourself. You may still encounter noise. The world will not suddenly become quiet, but you have changed how you meet it. You no longer take its turbulence personally. You no longer confuse its opinions with your essence. You stand rooted while life moves around you, like a tree that does not argue with the wind. You sway when needed. You remain when needed. You trust your roots. And so you live now with a quiet confidence that needs no audience. You act from purpose rather than pressure. You allow life to unfold without constant commentary. You know when to speak, when to listen, and when to let silence carry the wisdom that words cannot. This is not withdrawal from life. This is intimacy with it. As you continue on your path, remember this gentle truth. The universe does not require your defense. Your soul does not require your explanation. You are not here to prove your value. You are here to express it. When you stop defending yourself, you stop fragmenting your energy. You gather yourself back into wholeness. And in that wholeness, you become a quiet blessing to yourself, to others, and to the unfolding world. Let this be the way you walk forward now. Not guarded, not hardened, not reactive, but awake. Awake to the intelligence that guides you. Awake to the peace that lives beneath every moment. Awake to the simple, liberating realization that nothing real about you has ever been in danger. And in this awakening, you find the deepest freedom of all, the freedom to be without defense, exactly as you are. There is a quiet wisdom that lives beneath all the noise of your thinking, beneath the urgency of your plans, beneath the restless habit of trying to control what has never truly been yours to manage. It speaks softly, patiently, without urgency or force, and it has been speaking to you your entire life. It says, in a voice that feels more like remembering than learning, that life is not asking you to wrestle it into submission. Life is asking you to trust it. Most of the suffering we experience does not come from what happens to us, but from the tension we create by resisting what is. Resistance is subtle. It disguises itself as responsibility, as vigilance, as being prepared. But beneath it lies a quiet fear, the belief that if you loosen your grip, everything will fall apart. And yet, the opposite has always been true. The tighter you cling, the more strained life becomes. The moment you soften, something extraordinary begins to happen. Imagine trying to hold water in a clenched fist. The harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes you. But when you open your hand, when you allow it to rest gently in your palm, it remains. Life responds the same way. It flows toward openness, not force. It aligns with surrender, not struggle. Letting go is not giving up. It is giving in to something wiser than the ego's need to dominate outcomes. It is recognizing that there is an intelligence moving through the universe that has been orchestrating galaxies, seasons, heartbeats, and breath long before you arrived with your to-do list and your worries. You did not create this intelligence, and you cannot improve upon it, but you can align with it. The ego resists this idea because it survives on control. The ego believes that your worth is measured by how much you manage, how much you predict, how much you defend yourself against uncertainty. It whispers that if you stop striving, you will be left behind. If you stop worrying, you will be unprepared. If you stop resisting, you will be vulnerable. But vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is openness, and openness is where miracles enter. A miracle is not a violation of natural law. It is a shift in perception. It is what happens when you stop insisting that life conform to your fears and allow yourself to see what has been available all along. When you release resistance, you are not abandoning discernment or wisdom. You are abandoning the illusion that you are separate from the flow of life. Notice how often your mind revisits the past, replaying moments that cannot be changed, rehearsing conversations that have already ended, carrying resentments like heavy stones in your pocket. The past survives only because you keep breathing life into it. And every time you do, you steal energy from the present moment, the only place where peace actually exists. The universe does not operate in yesterday. It operates in now. Healing happens now. Insight happens now. Love happens now. The moment you release your attachment to how things should have been, you reclaim the power to experience how things are. And how things are, when seen without resistance, is often far kinder than the stories you tell yourself. Forgiveness is one of the most profound forms of letting go, not because it excuses behavior, but because it releases you from being emotionally chained to it. There are no justified resentments if your goal is peace. Resentment is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to feel the effects. When you forgive, you are not declaring that the past was acceptable. You are declaring that your future matters more than your pain. Surrender is often misunderstood as passivity. In truth, it is the most empowered state you can occupy. When you surrender, you stop arguing with reality. You stop demanding guarantees before you move forward. You trust that the same intelligence that brought you this far has not suddenly abandoned you. Think of a leaf floating down a river. It does not know every bend ahead, nor does it need to. It moves with the current, not against it. When obstacles appear, the water does not panic. It flows around them, reshapes itself, continues onward. You are made of that same intelligence. When you stop resisting, you become fluid again. Fear loses its grip when you realize that uncertainty is not the enemy, it is the doorway. Every transformation you have ever experienced began in uncertainty. You did not know how it would unfold, yet something within you moved anyway. That something was not fear, it was trust. Trust is not blind optimism. It is a deep inner knowing that you are supported by life itself. When you trust the flow of the universe, you are not saying that challenges will disappear. You are saying that you will meet them without the added burden of inner conflict. Healing begins within, always. Not when circumstances change, not when people apologize, not when life becomes predictable. Healing begins the moment you stop resisting the truth of who you are. A divine being having a human experience, temporarily forgetting your origin. You are not here to conquer life. You are here to express it. The mind wants answers. The soul wants alignment. When you align with love instead of fear, with acceptance instead of resistance, your outer world reorganizes itself in ways the rational mind could never predict. This is not mystical exaggeration. It is the natural consequence of harmony. Notice how peace feels when you stop trying to control the next moment. Notice the spaciousness that appears when you allow emotions to pass through you without labeling them as enemies. Emotions are weather patterns, not identities. You are the sky, not the storm. You are already enough, not because you have perfected yourself, but because you were never incomplete. The belief that you must become something else to deserve peace is one of the ego's most persistent illusions. Peace is not a reward for improvement. It is your natural state when you stop resisting yourself. When you release control, you make room for guidance. When you surrender fear, intuition speaks more clearly. When you trust the flow of the universe, life responds with opportunities, connections, and insights that feel almost effortless. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. Miracles often arrive quietly. They do not always announce themselves with fireworks. Sometimes they appear as a gentle shift in perspective, a softened heart, a sense of calm where anxiety once lived. Sometimes the greatest miracle is simply realizing that you no longer need to fight. Acceptance does not mean you approve of everything that happens. It means you stop arguing with the fact that it has happened. From that place of acceptance, wise action becomes possible. From resistance, only exhaustion follows. As you move through life, you will be tempted again and again to tighten your grip, to demand certainty, to resist change. When that happens, pause, breathe. Ask yourself whether your suffering is coming from the situation or from your insistence that it be different. This single question has the power to dissolve years of struggle. Letting go is not a one-time decision. It is a practice, a gentle, daily choice to trust life more than fear, to listen to the soul more than the ego, to flow rather than force. Each time you choose acceptance, you step closer to your true nature. And here is the quiet truth that changes everything. The universe is not testing you. It is responding to you. When you resist, it reflects resistance. When you trust, it reflects support. When you let go, it reveals its generosity. You were never meant to carry the weight of the world alone. You were meant to participate in a dance with life, guided by an intelligence far greater than the thinking mind. When you stop resisting and let go, You do not lose yourself. You finally come home. And in that home, miracles are not rare events. They are simply what happens when you allow life to move through you, unobstructed as it always has. And as you rest in this remembering, something subtle begins to rearrange itself inside you. The urgency softens. The inner voice that once demanded certainty grows quiet, not because it has been silenced, but because it has finally been heard. In that silence, you discover that peace is not something you manufacture through effort. It is something that rises naturally when you stop interfering with your own being. There is a sacred intelligence in pauses. The ego rushes because it believes time is scarce, but the soul knows that timing is precise. When you stop forcing the next step and allow yourself to be present with this one, clarity appears without struggle. Guidance does not shout. It arrives as a gentle nudge, a calm sense of direction, a feeling of resonance rather than pressure. You recognize it not by excitement, but by ease. You may notice how often your thoughts try to negotiate with life, offering conditions for your happiness. I will be peaceful when this changes. I will trust when I have proof. I will let go when I feel safe. But safety does not precede trust. Trust creates safety. The moment you decide to lean into life rather than brace against it, your nervous system responds, your breath deepens, and your body remembers that it belongs here. There is a deep healing that occurs when you stop trying to outrun discomfort and instead allow it to pass through you. Emotions are not obstacles on the path. They are messages asking for acknowledgement. When you meet them with compassion instead of resistance, they complete their purpose and dissolve. What remains is not emptiness, but spaciousness, the kind that allows insight to arrive unannounced. You are not here to perfect the human experience. You are here to experience it fully, without self-condemnation. The moments you judge yourself for struggling are the very moments that call for gentleness. Growth is not linear. Awakening is not a straight ascent. It is a spiral of remembering, forgetting, and remembering again, each time with a little more grace. When you stop insisting on being right, you gain access to being free. The need to be right is a subtle form of resistance, a way the ego protects its identity. But freedom does not require validation. It requires openness. In openness, you discover that you can hold opposing truths without fracture, that life is complex and still benevolent, that you do not need to reduce it to understand it. There is a profound shift that happens when you realize you do not have to chase meaning. Meaning emerges from presence. When you are fully here, washing a dish, listening to a friend, feeling your breath, life reveals itself as sacred without effort. Ordinary moments become luminous when they are met without agenda. You may have been taught to believe that strength looks like endurance without rest, like persistence without softness. Yet true strength is the courage to relax into what is real. It is the willingness to say, I do not know, and remain open. It is the humility to be guided rather than driven. As you release the habit of resistance, you begin to sense a quiet companionship with life. You feel less alone, not because circumstances have changed, but because separation has dissolved. You recognize that the same presence listening to these words is the presence that animates all things. This is not philosophy, it is experience, available whenever you stop arguing with the moment. Letting go does not remove you from the world. It allows you to engage with it more fully, without the armor of fear. You respond rather than react, you choose rather than defend. And in this state, your actions become aligned with love, not obligation. The miracles you seek are not waiting somewhere in the future. They are unfolding now, in the quiet spaces where you choose trust over tension, acceptance over resistance. Each time you soften, you signal to life that you are ready to receive. And life, ever responsive, meets you there. Stay here in this openness. Allow the flow to carry you without needing to know where it leads. You are not being taken away from yourself. You are being returned to what you have always been, whole, supported, and deeply at home in the unfolding mystery of existence. And in this returning, you may notice how the body begins to trust again. The shoulders drop, the jaw loosens. The breath no longer feels like something you must manage, but something that carries you. The body has always known when you are at war with the moment. It tightens in response to your resistance and softens when you allow life to be as it is. Listening to this wisdom is another form of surrender, a way of letting the mind step aside so a deeper intelligence can lead. There is a quiet courage in allowing yourself to feel joy without waiting for permission. The ego often delays happiness as if it must be earned through suffering or justified by achievement. But joy is not a distraction from growth, it is nourishment for it. When you permit yourself to experience lightness without explanation, you affirm your trust in life's benevolence. You declare that well-being does not need a defense. As resistance dissolves, gratitude arises naturally, not as a practice you force, but as a response to seeing clearly. Gratitude is what happens when you recognize how much effort you once spent pushing against what was already carrying you. You begin to notice the quiet supports, the timing that worked out without your planning, the help that arrived unannounced, the inner resilience that appeared when you thought you had none left. These were not accidents. They were always there, waiting for your attention. You may find that your relationships begin to change as well. When you stop resisting yourself, you stop demanding that others complete you, rescue you, or validate your worth. You meet them as they are, not as solutions to your unease. From this place, love becomes less of a transaction and more of a shared presence. You listen more deeply because you are no longer rehearsing your defense. There is a liberation in realizing that you do not need to solve your entire life today. The soul does not work on deadlines. It unfolds with a rhythm that cannot be rushed without distortion. When you align with this rhythm, patience ceases to feel like waiting and becomes a form of participation. You are moving, even when it looks like stillness. In moments of doubt, remember that uncertainty is not a flaw in the design. It is an invitation to trust something beyond your conditioning. The mind seeks closure because it fears the unknown, but the unknown is where creativity lives. When you stop resisting ambiguity, you open yourself to possibilities that certainty would have excluded. You may notice an impulse to return to old habits of control, especially when change feels imminent. Meet that impulse with kindness rather than judgment. Awareness itself is progress. Each time you notice resistance without feeding it, you weaken its hold. You are learning a new way of being, one that does not rely on tension for momentum. As you continue to let go, life feels less like a series of obstacles and more like a conversation. You listen, you respond, you adjust. You are no longer trying to dominate the dialogue. You are participating in it. And participation brings intimacy, a sense that you are not outside of life looking in, but within it, moving as it moves. This is the paradox the ego cannot grasp. When you stop trying to control the flow, you gain access to a deeper form of influence. Your presence becomes coherent. Your intentions align with something larger than personal gain. And from this alignment, your actions carry a quiet power, one that does not need force to be effective. Remain open to this unfolding. Let the next moment arrive without interrogation. You are not surrendering your intelligence, you are expanding it beyond fear. In this expanded awareness, you find that peace is not fragile. It is resilient, steady, and always available when you stop resisting the life that is already offering itself to you. And as this peace settles more deeply, you begin to sense a gentler relationship with effort itself. You still act, still choose, still create, but the strain has fallen away. Action no longer feels like pushing a heavy door uphill. It feels like responding to an inner invitation. You move because it feels true, not because you are afraid of what will happen if you do not. In this way, effort becomes elegant and discipline becomes devotion rather than punishment. There is a subtle dignity in living this way. You stop broadcasting urgency into every moment. You stop trying to prove that you matter by how busy you are or how much you carry. Your value no longer needs reinforcement. It is assumed quietly, the way the sun assumes its place in the sky without asking to be applauded. From this knowing, self-respect replaces self-criticism and compassion replaces comparison. You may notice that your thoughts begin to lose their sharp edges. They still appear, but they no longer command unquestioned authority. You see them as weather passing through awareness, not as orders you must obey. This distance is not indifference, it is wisdom. When you stop resisting thoughts, they lose their urgency. When you stop believing every story they tell, they soften and reorganize themselves around truth. In this space, intuition has room to breathe. It does not compete with logic, it complements it. It offers guidance that feels whole rather than fragmented, inclusive rather than fearful. You recognize intuition by how it feels in the body, steady, calm, unhurried. It does not rush you toward decisions. It invites you into alignment. There is also a deep humility that emerges when you stop resisting life's unfolding. You realize how little you needed to control for things to work out. How many times you were carried through moments you thought would break you. This humility does not diminish you. It enlarges you. It opens your heart to awe, to reverence, to the quiet miracle of simply being here. As you live from this openness, you begin to trust your capacity to meet whatever arises. Not because you have rehearsed every scenario, but because you have experienced your own resilience. You know now that you can feel deeply without drowning, that you can face uncertainty without collapsing, that you can let go without disappearing. This confidence is not bravado. It is grounded, lived, earned through surrender. Life continues to present contrast, loss and gain, clarity and confusion, endings and beginnings. Letting go does not erase these rhythms. It allows you to move through them without clinging. You grieve without becoming grief. You celebrate without becoming dependent on celebration. You remain anchored in something that does not come and go. This anchoring is your spiritual identity, the part of you that witnesses experience without being consumed by it. It is not distant or aloof. It is intimately involved, yet free. When you live from this center, you no longer ask life to make you whole. You meet life as wholeness itself. And so the practice continues, moment by moment. You notice resistance as it arises, and you soften. You feel fear, and you breathe. You encounter uncertainty, and you trust. Each small act of letting go reinforces the truth that you are supported, guided, and held in ways the thinking mind cannot fully explain. Do not rush this unfolding. There is nowhere else you need to arrive. The miracle is not ahead of you, it is happening now, in your willingness to stay present, to remain open, to meet life without armor. In this meeting, something sacred reveals itself, not as a distant promise, but as a living experience of peace, moving quietly through you, steady and unafraid, reminding you again and again that when you stop resisting, life does not abandon you, it embraces you. And in this embrace, you discover that nothing essential has ever been missing. What you once searched for in effort, in approval, in outcomes, has always lived quietly within you, waiting for stillness to be noticed. The need to become dissolves, replaced by the grace of remembering. You are not arriving at truth. You are relaxing back into it. There is a softness that comes when you stop measuring your life against imagined standards. You begin to live by resonance rather than comparison. What feels aligned draws you forward. What feels heavy releases its hold. This discernment does not require analysis. It arises naturally when you are no longer resisting your own inner guidance. Life simplifies when you trust what feels true. You may sense now how gently existence supports you when you stop demanding guarantees. Each breath arrives without negotiation. Each heartbeat continues without your instruction. This quiet cooperation between you and life has never been broken. It was only obscured by the habit of control. When you let go of that habit, the partnership becomes visible again. There is a deep relief in no longer needing to be everywhere at once. Presence gathers your energy back from the past and the future and offers it to this moment. Here, you are enough. Here, nothing is lacking. Here, peace does not need to be chased because it is not running from you. As you rest in this awareness, compassion expands not as an obligation, but as a natural response to recognizing yourself in others. You see that everyone is learning how to let go in their own way, at their own pace. Judgment softens because separation fades. Kindness becomes effortless when you remember that the same life moving through you moves through all things. The universe does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be present. It does not require that you understand everything. It invites you to trust what you cannot fully explain. In this trust, fear loosens its grip and curiosity takes its place. Life becomes an exploration rather than a battle. You no longer need to brace yourself against what might happen. You meet each moment with openness, knowing that whatever arrives will be met with the wisdom you already carry. This is not naivete. It is faith grounded in experience, the experience of having survived, learned, and grown each time you chose surrender over resistance. And so you continue, not with certainty, but with confidence in the flow itself. You allow life to move through you as it always has, unobstructed by fear, unburdened by control. In this allowing, miracles do not announce themselves. They simply occur quietly, naturally, as expressions of harmony restored. Stay here, in this gentle knowing. Let the mind rest. Let the heart remain open. Let life reveal itself moment by moment without your interference. You are safe in the unfolding. You are guided in the uncertainty. You are held in something far greater than effort. And as you walk forward from this place, remember, peace was never something you had to earn. It emerges the moment you stop resisting who you are and allow yourself to be carried by the same loving intelligence that has always known the way.